Questions? Am I recognized? Do you yield? I guess.
Do you yield,
Yes,
Senator Huffines?
certainly.
You're recognized.
Yield for the question.
First of all, I think we need to all slow down. Would you not agree, Senator Huffines, that this is the most serious topic? In fact, would you not agree the bill that Senator Estes is laying out is a game changer, is the way I described it a while ago. And one of the reasons why I wouldn't offer up my vote on the 3-day suspension, because normally that would be a courtesy to move the process, but members, this is not a Senate process matter. This is a matter between you and your district. And Senator Huffines, would you agree with me that we're going to be asked about this vote, not only the main bill, but your amendment? I mean, would you agree with me this is a topic that all of Texas is watching?
Yes, I agree.
Would you agree with me as we travel across the state or back home during the session, would you agree with me, or have you experienced that this would be maybe the #1 topic?
It could be.
Maybe even, it's been my experience, more so than the tax cuts, the budget, or darn near anything else. Would you agree that's how important this bill is in your amendment?
It could be.
Are you aware that every law enforcement agency, the people that we honor on a regular basis, in fact, 2 days ago I had a adjournment in honor of one of our fallen heroes, a Houston police officer. That officer, his organization, have asked us to be against your amendment. Are you aware of that?
No.
Well, let me just assure you that the law enforcement agencies, large and small, the people that we honor on a regular basis, say they need to be able to approach someone that has a gun. In fact, they're trained to do so. Look for the person with the gun when you're making a call. They focus their eyes and actions on the gun carrier. They need to, under the proposed legislation, to be able to distinguish who's doing it legally and who's doing it illegally. Would you understand that's the police officer's training and understanding?
I don't know exactly what their training is, but if if they're suspecting someone of suspicious behavior, this amendment does not come into play. If, for instance, they don't look like they're 21 years old, the police have reasonable cause to stop them and ask them if they have a CHL license.
What happens if a police officer gets a radio call while he or she's on patrol that there's a burglary, no, not a burglary, a robbery in process at the Valero in my district on Memorial Drive? The officer gets there, and there's 2 individuals with pistols on their side leaving the store. They might even go in different directions. You don't want the police officer to have the right to confront one or both of them and ask them, are they legally carrying an open weapon? So you don't want an officer making a call to a robbery in progress, and maybe the bad guy's inside. He doesn't know where the outlaw is. You don't want the officer to ask the question of 2 individuals, which one of you have a legal weapon and which has an illegal? That's the scenario and a real life example that you're setting up.
This amendment would not affect that situation. The answer is yes. They'd have the right to question those 2 suspects.
Go ahead. Not if they're leaving the scene. They might be across the street, and I understand you got great legal counsel standing behind you. But I think he's wrong, and this is the concern of the police officers. They won't be able to do their job, their sworn duty to protect us, if you don't allow them, in the right circumstance, to ask someone, do they have a license to carry an open weapon? You're not only endangering Senator Huffines, would you agree with me? You're not only, if your amendment goes on, going to endanger the public, but they're going to specifically endanger law enforcement that have to enforce our laws. They need to know who has a right to have a gun and who doesn't.
I completely disagree. Right now, this amendment specifically states solely because they are carrying.
And that's
solely
the scenario,
because.
Senator Huffines, that's the scenario I just described.
No, you didn't. There was a crime being committed.
In the store.
Yes,
I'm gonna, okay, let me give you the real life example. The bad guy that the call went out is in the store, in the process of holding people hostage, robbing the cashier, and it may be two open carry, legally open carry individuals trying to get away from the scene, to get to their car to leave. The officer pulls up and sees more than one individual with an open carried firearm. What would you have the officer do?
If there's
I mean, they tell me they better stay in their car. What would you have them do?
I'll be happy to answer your question. Give me a chance. If a crime...
You want to just give Senator West the mic and we can say...
I'll call
we can eliminate... Who's the middleman? I don't know if you're the middleman or he's the middleman.
No, I'm answering your question.
Okay. Fine. Senator West, there's your chair right over here.
If a crime's being committed in the area...
In the store.
They have a right to question anyone. That's not what this amendment's about. It strictly says that if the reason to be stopped is solely because they are exercising their Second Amendment.
No, I've got it in the process of making the call with the bad guy in the store. The officer sees someone in the parking lot. Or he may be across the street. They may be an observer. They got an open carry. The officer needs to be able to approach them to make sure they're not even a suspect.
It does not change that circumstance.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's just get a little more simpler. Why in the world do you think all the police officers are opposed to your amendment if, in fact, it doesn't detrimentally affect them?
I don't know if that's the case. I don't think...
Well, take my word for it. I work in criminal justice with law enforcement each and every day. Well, they can't do their job in protecting the public and the police officers if you don't allow them to approach people and say, do you have a right to have your gun?
Do you know who Cleet is?
Do I know what Cleet is?
Yes. Yeah,
of course I know what Cleet is.
Well, it's my understanding they are
enforcement officers in Texas.
It's my understanding they're in support of the amendment. I do not take the premise that the police are not in support of this amendment. There might be a few that aren't in support of this amendment.
Let me ask you another question, because I don't think I'm going to change yours or Senator West's mind. Are you going to pull your amendment down, or are you serious about us having an up or down vote on your amendment? Because see, a while ago you had the constitutional carry, you pulled it down, so I don't know if you're going to pull this one down or not.
Dean, we're going to vote on this amendment. This is a nonpartisan amendment. This amendment passed 133 to 10 in the House.
Well, let me just quickly, in all due respect to the House,
let me tell you, those that won't open carry, this is the quickest path to the governor's desk.
Okay, that's what I want to ask. Are you aware that if your amendment goes on, the sponsor of the legislation says there's not going to be a conference committee to strip it off, that your language will become part of the bill that goes to the governor's desk? Are you aware of that? I mean,
yes.
This is how serious your amendment is.
Absolutely.
It will become the law of the state of Texas that, one, you have a right to carry a firearm, and number two, you're going to restrict law enforcement from approaching anyone because they have a firearm and ask them, do they have a license?
That is not what my amendment does. My amendment protects the Second and the Fourth Amendment of our Constitution. And this, yes, I am perfectly aware that this is going to get on the bill, just like the House had it on the bill.
Are you aware also that there is a coalition of senators being formed as we talk that are going to support your amendment? Some because they're philosophically in tune with you, and others perhaps because they were under the impression it was going to kill the bill. But are you familiar that all my colleagues should understand this will become the law of the state of Texas if your amendment goes on?
Well, I'm not speculating if people would support it or not support it, but I can tell you that it would be a good thing that this gets on the bill.
And you don't have any concern about the safety of our law enforcement officers or the public that they're sworn to protect?
I'm always concerned about the safety of law enforcement, of course, but that's not what this amendment's about. It's about defending our Second and Fourth Amendments.
Where does the Second Amendment describe a scenario that I laid out for you a while ago that law enforcement tells me is going to be a real live example that they're making a call? I think Senator Huffman even referenced Waco. Up until this point, I think you could say this proposed statute, would not affect Waco, and I don't think you'll be able to say that after your amendment goes on, because in the Waco crisis, if an officer came up there and there was just someone having lunch or going through the parking lot, was not a gang member or motorcycle gang member, and they have open carry, they may be blocks away. You're going to prevent law enforcement from approaching them in the scenario of Waco.
Not if they're suspected of committing a crime.
How do you determine that? If they're 2 blocks from the Waco...
It's the officer's judgment. That's not what the amendment says, Dean. It clearly says solely because. If they suspect you of a crime, if they suspect you don't have a permit, if you're wearing gang colors, of course you're going to be able to be stopped as being suspected of a crime.
From what we've learned, there were a group of law enforcement at the location before the crisis broke out. They had intelligence that there was going to be a gang meeting and there were controversies. So they had the area staked out. What if you're a couple of blocks away, and for the safety of the officers and the public, they need to approach someone blocks away from where the accident occurred, the incident, and ask people?
They have to have reasonable judgment of the circumstances. And
reasonable judgment. Do you know right now, do you know what the training for officers are? You're wanting them to go back through a whole new training procedure.
I'd like to have order, please, in the Senate. I'd like to have total quiet in the Senate, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I can't be more sincere than I'm being by telling you that police officers that I listen to in the Criminal Justice Committee, that we honor regularly, have told me that this not only will interfere with their job performance, it frightens them. It frightens them on behalf of the people that you represent, I represent, and Senator West represent. This is not John Whitmire's opinion. It's just so that I agree with them, that they need to be able to, and Senator Estes used good judgment. He's calling it confusion. I'm going to call it a threat to law enforcement officers and the people we represent. If your amendment goes on, Senator, why won't you listen to the people that put their lives on the line every day for us? Don't you think their opinion is probably clearer and more qualified than yours or mine?
You want me to answer the question? You want me to answer the question? I'm going to answer the question, and I'll tell you what. You don't speak for all the police. This is the same argument we heard when we got the CHL process started. And I think there are police for this amendment, and there are a lot of police forces might have been against it when we first got CHL. They will learn how to deal with the situation without violating the Fourth Amendment of people's constitutional right not to be unreasonably searched.
Senator, were you here when we passed the CHL?
I was not. I was not.
Do you know I was? Do you know I voted for it? And that was not one of the arguments presented by law enforcement. One of the arguments was there might be road rage.
Shootouts.
There might be incidents which have not proven to be accurate.
Right.
But I voted for the CHL.
I'm glad you did.
I'm not afraid of guns. But I do listen to law enforcement who works the streets of Texas in very dangerous situations. This has gotten so ridiculous. When we passed it the first time, we couldn't even prevent open carry in this building. Now here we got the dangers of attracting people to this building, and now we're going to allow open carry in this building where emotions run high. We attract some emotionally disturbed people, and we're not going to allow the Capitol Police members. Senator Huffines, do you really not want the Capitol Police to be able to approach someone who has an open carry in the halls of this building and ask them, do they have a right to carry that gun? In this environment.
If they suspect that person of a crime, they could ask them.
Well, maybe they want to ask them why they're videotaping us. It might be just an inquiry about what is your motive in following members. And in the meantime, there's someone standing right next to that person that doesn't have the camera, but somebody's next to him or her that's got an open carry. You don't want the state troopers that protect us in this building and the people that we represent to be able to. What about the school children that come to this building? And somebody's walking down the hall with an open carry. You don't want the state troopers to be able to walk up and say, excuse me, do you have a right to have an open carry gun in the state capitol with hundreds of school children here on a daily basis? Have you thought about that?
Yes.
And you don't realize the danger that you'd be placing the school children under?
If you have a CHL and you can carry it in this building, you should have the right to open carry it.
And I had an amendment that would restrict open carry in this building because of the school children. We do attract emotionally disturbed individuals, and that amendment went down. So now you can have open carry here, but your amendment would go a huge step in not allowing the law enforcement to protect the children in this building from asking someone when they walk up the steps of the Capitol, excuse me, do you have a right to carry an open weapon?
What my amendment's going to do is to clarify the law and keep our police force from being sued and our taxpayers from paying the legal cost of violating the Fourth Amendment. That's what my amendment's going to do.
The police officers that you say you're concerned about being sued are against your amendment.
I don't agree with that.
Well, I tell you what, would you agree to pull your amendment down for about 2 hours and get them and allow them to contact you?
No.
Well, what are you afraid of, the truth? That the police officers in the next 2 hours can give you repeated calls and asking you not to endanger their lives and the people they represent?
It's not the case. I feel like we don't need to waste the members' time. I disagree.
I know, but would you pull your amendment down for 2 hours and let the officers, it won't be my opinion then, or I won't be repeating their position, they'll contact you personally. Would you be willing to do that?
No.
What are you afraid of? That the officers will come from every department in this state and ask you to pull down your amendment?
And I'm not afraid of that. I just told you, I'm not here to bargain on my amendment, to wait around. I think I can go round up officers that would be in favor of the amendment, but that's not what we're here about.
I'd be willing to hear from them if you give us a couple hours to hear from those that are in favor.
Look,
I don't believe you can.
You can hear can hear from them all you want. The House passed this 133 to 10.
In all due respect, what difference does it matter what the House
because I guess
I've spent 10 years over there,
Yep.
and they're a fine group of representatives, but we're the Senate. I don't know what the circumstances were, but it really doesn't matter. The Senate has to make the ultimate decision. This is our opportunity to improve the bill, pass the bill, or defeat it, but your amendment is what we're talking about. And it really doesn't matter what the vote was. They may have voted that to try to kill the bill. I don't know the circumstances. And they may not have actually heard from the police officers. Do you know if the House heard from the police officers before they voted?
One would assume with 133 positive votes, nonpartisan, that they probably did.
You think they did? Did anybody even anticipate the amendment before they voted? I'm told by the police officers they couldn't believe their eyes or what they were hearing because it's going to endanger them.
John, I've got an answer for that question.
Beg pardon?
I have an answer for the question you're asking.
Actually, I think we had a House member that participated now in the Senate is what I'm being told. But I don't want to yield at this time because I'm going to try to get Senator Huffines to understand, is there anything that would get you to understand the concerns of the police officers? And you know what? Let me ask you another thing, because I respect you so much. Who told you that Cleet, Senator, who told you that Cleet supported your amendment? And would it matter to you significantly if, in fact, they're opposed to it? Because, you know, now we're getting to the credibility of our discussion, and I like you and respect you, but you surely were misinformed when Cleet said that they supported it. I know Senator West didn't tell you that. Cleet is opposed to your amendment, Senator. Would you like to hear from them and not use them as a source? They're very respectable combined law enforcement officers of Texas. Would you like to know that they're opposed to your amendment?
Well, it was representatives of Cleet. It was presented to me that are in agreement with the amendment.
Well, I just saw documentation, and I'll be glad to forward it to you, that Cleet, as an organization representing thousands of police officers, multiple police agencies are opposed to your amendment. And I think if that mattered to you 10 minutes ago, it should be significant now, should it not be?
I didn't say that it mattered that much. What matters is that we don't violate our citizens of Texas rights. And I still don't think you really understand the amendment, Dean. The amendment is specifically about solely stopping someone because they are carrying. Not if you can. The police
on the Capitol grounds, solely when you walk up Congress and enter the Capitol, no crime being committed. You don't think that the troopers should have the right to stop someone at the steps of the Capitol and say, "Excuse me, I notice your gun. Do you have a right, a license to carry that gun?" You don't think state troopers need to do that in this environment?
There would be no difference if you have a concealed handgun or an open handgun.
Of course it matters. The concealed, Senator, they don't see the firearm. That's the whole purpose in the concealed weapons statute. In fact, Jerry Patterson, who passed it, I voted for it. The whole idea was to have it concealed so the bad guys would think all of us might have a concealed weapon. And it's worked very effectively. The open carry now is a major game changer. And I think we've already seen the vote is there to do open carry, but now you don't want law enforcement involved at all in the inspection of someone having a license or not in license.
And that's not true.
Well, let me just tell you, I don't know how much longer I can ask you questions, but I'm going to do it about as long as my bad back will allow me, because somebody's got to slow this down to where police officers can contact their senators. Those members that were going to support your amendment because they thought it would kill the bill need to be informed that the sponsor says it will not be taken out in conference, but it'll go straight to the governor. And one, for the first time since the Wild West 1880s, you'll be able to have an open carry And number two, Senator, you're going to prohibit law enforcement from questioning someone about the validity or the legality of that person carrying an open carry.
That is not what the amendment says.
Well, I respectfully think you ought to look at your amendment. Now, a while ago, you didn't know that CLEAT was opposed to it, so I have to also be concerned about your accuracy about what your amendment really means. I think you could not only be just as wrong about your amendment as you were that the combined law enforcement officers of Texas are opposed to it.
I suspect, Senator, that they were probably opposed against this bill from the very beginning.
I think that's an accurate statement, too, because they're concerned about some of the concerns that I have as a gun owner about someone taking a person's exposed firearm away from them. See, I do not have, Senator, are you aware of my position? I am not that concerned about the person carrying the gun as I am someone taking that gun away from them, particularly in this building. Would you like to have a phone call from the executive director of CLEAT, since that's one of the resources that you referenced?
Nope. It's irrelevant to this amendment.
Irrelevant?
No, it doesn't matter about the amendment. That's not what we're...
So officers don't matter. Is that your position?
No, that's not the argument here. The discussion we're talking about is simply about not being harassed if you're exercising your Second Amendment. If the police suspect you of committing a crime, they can stop you and ask you if you have your CHL license.
Okay, so you're walking up Congress, you're approaching the Capitol, not committing a crime, but the state troopers would like to approach you and ask you, do you have a license? Of course, I guess one of my problems is, Senator, help me, you don't think you even need a license in the first place. Is that not true? So maybe my problem is I'm just not making a difference in my line of questioning because, one, you don't even think you need a license. You ought to be able to have a felony record or even have a history of mental illness and be able to do an open carry. Is that not your position?
That's not what we're talking about here, but your position is the same as if you should stop every vehicle driving down the road under the pretense, not violating any law, just the pretense you could be violating law.
When you're driving down the road, you need probable cause. We all understand that.
That's what this amendment's about.
Except we're not talking about driving down the road. We're talking about strapping a firearm on your side, that bullets that kill, and you don't want the law enforcement agencies to be able to question someone about their license, which they're going to be required. I know you don't like the license because you think the mentally disturbed individuals and the felons, someone coming out of prison ought to go ahead and get him a pistol and open carry, because that's your view of the Second Amendment, is it not?
No, it's incorrect.
You don't believe in constitutional carry, which you had an amendment about 30 minutes ago?
That's not what we're talking about, but that's not what that's about. That's not what
I know, you pulled it down. I'm surprised. You're such a believer in the Second Amendment, such a purist. Why did you pull your amendment down earlier if you feel you don't need a license to carry a firearm in the state of Texas?
You know what? I appreciate your concern on that, Senator, but what we want to talk about and what I'm talking about right now is this amendment.
And that's why I'm spending the time to ask you about the concern. Senator Huffman did a great job. Actually, I believe came out of her committee. She knows of the concerns of law enforcement about the dangers if they're not allowed to ask someone about the legality of having a firearm on their side.
They can ask.
Sir?
They can ask if someone is carrying the firearm. If they suspect for any reason, a reasonable suspicion there could be a crime involved or about to be committed, same as they would always be able to do. This just clarifies the fact that you cannot solely stop and detain someone because they are carrying.
And who's going to determine that they...
The great judgment, the good judgment of our police. The same judgment they exercise on a daily basis in most circumstances and situations they find themselves in. Senator, there are 45 states that have open carry. 45.
And I've looked up most of them, and most of them have different versions than the one that we're about to pass. In fact, you like to use Pennsylvania. Have you looked up the Pennsylvania provisions for open carry?
I didn't use Pennsylvania.
Sir?
I have not.
Well, let me tell you about Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's pretty practical. The state has open carry except the city of Philadelphia. And quite frankly, I think any proposed open carry in Texas should have been modeled after that state. If you want to carry open carry in West Texas or East Texas in the rural parts of this state, perhaps it makes some sense. I think it would be acceptable in those communities. I think we ought to be able to exempt or prevent major metropolitan areas like Houston from having open carry, because it's going to be a lot different in Houston than it is in Alpine near the Big Bend. So when you want to cite 45 states, have you looked at the variations of open carry? Are you familiar? One of the states that you can only have open carry if you're in your automobile, which might or might not be a good idea. But for you to stand there and say 45 states have open carry, you got to really go from state to state to see how much sense it makes. I promise you, the law enforcement that I'm representing on the floor come out of our large cities. Although CLEAT, the one you attempted to use, who now we know is opposed, represents small departments and large departments. But the people that sent me down here from a diverse population like Houston are scared to death of this and think that you will endanger not only the public, but the police officers. So do you really think saying 45 states have open carry is a good, accurate statement when we're looking at a very specific statute here on the Senate floor? Because now you know Pennsylvania has a different policy for an urban city like Philadelphia than they do rural Pennsylvania.
Yes.
The question was, do you think it matters what the other 45 states do? Because now you're finding out that they all have a little unique provision to address whether you're in Montana or downtown Philadelphia.
I'm sure that there are many states that have different variations of open carry. It's not about my amendment.
Could I ask you this? Let me ask you this, your amendment. Let's get back to your amendment.
Okay, good.
How many of the 45 states that you like to reference have an amendment like yours? Would you believe probably, I would almost guess none, but I don't shoot from the hip. I'd be willing to find out with you. Do you know?
No, I do not.
How many of the 45 states who have open carry have an amendment like yours? Have language like yours?
I do not know.
Well, don't you think it would be interesting to find out?
No.
Would you find any of this interesting to find out?
I find that what you're suggesting, Senator, that the police should have this authority to violate a law-abiding Texan's right to stop them is the exact reasons why we need this amendment.
Now, my position is this, so we can be real clear. I've been here 32 years, actually 42 if you add the 10 in the House. I don't know of anyone that has been a greater voice for law enforcement. I've dealt with their pensions, I've dealt with their civil service, I've given, unfortunately, too many eulogies at fallen heroes' funerals. So I take this very serious. When my police department, CLEAT, that you referenced a while ago, when they tell me that this will endanger their officers' lives, I'm going to do everything I can to block your amendment. And I didn't come to work today to talk for hours. But members, it's time to slow down and realize what's at stake here. I understand the votes are present, Senator Huffines, to pass open carry. We did it, I think, 2 months ago. I was opposed to it, you remember. But I also, do you recall, I am a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. You remember that conversation? I voted for the CHL in '98. I've taken the course. I have plenty of guns, rifles and pistols. I'm not afraid of weapons. But I am concerned about open carry. I'm also mostly concerned about someone taking a gun away from someone who is licensed to do an open carry. So that's going to happen. But now, I have to rise and use the energy and my voice to represent police officers that tell me this will endanger their lives. Because there's going to be occasions where no crime is being committed, to our knowledge, but a police officer is going to have to ask someone, or need to ask someone, maybe will you just move on, you know, at a scene or something. Will you just move on, and somebody's going to have an open carry, and to protect that officer's life, he doesn't have time, Senator Huffines, to wait till a crime to be committed. To protect that officer's life, he needs to ask someone, are you a licensed carrier? It's just that plain and simple. Why I hope you understand your amendment is being opposed by law enforcement. I mean, do you get the scenario I just described for you? No crime is being committed.
You want me to answer the question?
An officer, Senator Huffines, what if he's at a car accident? A car accident. No.
Excuse me, Senator. I want quiet in this chamber so members can talk on the floor, but please softly. But behind the rail, we will clear the area behind the rail if need be.
Senator Huffines, help me understand how a police officer would deal with this situation, because it's a very real one. There's a car accident.
Oh.
Either the participants or the occupants of the car get out with a firearm strapped to their side. Let's just stop right there. You don't want the officer to ask them, do you have a right to have that pistol strapped to your side, a loaded .357 Magnum? They're in a car accident, the officer shows up, they get out, they're exchanging insurance information, and one of them has a pistol. For the officer's safety, Senator Huffines, do you not see the need that he needs to ask that officer, ma'am, do you have a right to carry that firearm on your side?
If he feels like his life is in jeopardy, he can ask.
He does not necessarily at that point feel it. He just needs to know who all the players are.
He's going to exercise his judgment that he exercises every day in those situations. And I'm sure they're going to exercise it prudently and have confidence in the police to being able to handle the situation. Let me ask you, Dean, how many times do you want a policeman to stop somebody walking down the street with law-abiding Texan, exercising their right? How many times should they be stopped? Listen, I'm asking you a quick question.
I'll let you ask me questions. Normally I was asking, but you and I are such good friends. Go ahead and ask me a question.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. How many times should that law-abiding Texan walking down the street be asked?
Okay. Can I answer it?
Yes, sure. Go ahead.
Under today's laws, I think anytime an officer sees someone with a pistol on their side, under today's laws, they ought to be able to approach them and ask them what's going on. You know, that's in violation of the law. Now, the proposed law is going to allow that to be legal. You're just taking it a step further, that if an officer sees the need to protect himself, herself, or their colleagues, or the public, they're going to be able to inquire, excuse me, I would really like to know, do you have a license to carry that .357 that you've got strapped to your side? That's what we're talking about. The law enforcement officers across this state and the departments, the chiefs, the people that we're here to look out for, tell me, and they would tell you if you'd listen to them, that that's going to endanger their lives. If it was not for their word and my understanding of the difficulty of their job, I wouldn't be standing up here. When I drove over here this morning, did not know this was going to be a part of my activity today. And quite frankly, I was prepared to accept that you have the votes to pass open carry. I'm concerned, but elections matter, and the votes are here to pass open carry. But I thought our fine sponsor of this legislation, working with multiple members, had used good judgment to take the Dutton Amendment off. So now I've got to do everything I can to try to get everyone to realize, one, this isn't showbiz. It's not going to come off in conference. Your amendment's going to go on the bill, and the sponsor says it will then go to the governor's desk. So all the fears that the police officers told me about after Representative Dutton's amendment went on, now I'm looking straight in the face. And I'm going to spend as much time as I can to get you, one, to take this topic as serious as it is, and hopefully I would pray that you would let the police officers talk to you and let you know that they think it's going to cost police officers' lives. You know, let's assume I'm right and you're wrong. Let's assume the police officers are right and you're wrong. Do you really, and members, do you really want to cost some police officers their lives? Or perhaps constituents' lives? What if you're wrong, Senator Huffines? Do you ever doubt yourself about maybe the police officers know more about public safety than you do, and what's involved in their daily lives, in the inner, the dark, dangerous parts of some of our large cities, when they're out there by themselves? Do you ever worry about that? Did you ever question your amendment that in the dark streets in the mid-morning of Houston, Texas, an officer might need to just ask somebody walking down the street? No crime being committed, but at 3 in the morning, walking down a street in Houston, excuse me, do you have a license for that firearm? Or Dallas, do you ever worry about maybe that the officers know what they're talking about and you're going to cost one of them their lives?
I have complete confidence in the officers exercising their discretion.
Do you have confidence in their? Do you have confidence in their opinions that this is going to endanger them? Do you have confidence in their opinions that this is going to endanger them?
I have confidence that they'll exercise great discretion when they get presented in certain situations.
Well, let me repeat where I was 30 minutes ago. Would you please consider pulling your amendment down, and we'll ask the leadership to allow the time for the police officers to talk to you? Because I have talked to them. When's the last time you talked to a police officer? When's the last time you spoke in live, person-to-person with a police officer about anything?
Well, it hasn't been this week, but I have visited with him. I'm not sure exactly the last time.
When's the last time you talked to a police officer in person about your amendment?
Not recently.
Well, don't you think, since we're spending so much time about how this will impact law enforcement and police officers, that maybe you should talk to them?
You know, this amendment, Senator, is about our Constitution. That's what we're talking about.
I'm sorry. I was listening to two individuals. What did you say?
I said this amendment's about our
Oh,
Constitution.
I know the Second Amendment. Yeah, I understand. But you know the Second Amendment does have some restrictions. Like, for instance, you can't have a machine gun. Are you familiar with that? I mean, the Second Amendment has some controls on it. Do you understand, Senator? You know, the Second Amendment does not allow us to, I mean, we actually have a lot of restrictions on the type firearms. You know, we're still not going to, even with the Second Amendment, not be able to carry a weapon in where alcoholic beverages are served. I mean, we do have some common sense safeguards to protect the public and to protect the children. Are you aware of that, Senator? So the Second Amendment doesn't say that you can't have some restrictions to protect law enforcement. You got it? I mean, do you understand that the Second Amendment does have some restrictions?
No, I don't agree, necessarily agree. There's some court rulings on certain restrictions on the Second Amendment that.
Let me do something out of courtesy to my colleagues. I understand a number of other members want to speak, and I look forward to hearing their comments. And I hope now we've gotten everyone's attention. This is a game changer, and as I've told you, I think your amendment does severe harm to public safety, certainly our law enforcement officers, and I will yield at this point and allow other members, pro and con, I assume, to discuss it. But what I hope I've accomplished, Senator Huffines, is one, if your amendment goes on, it will become the law.
I can assure you that is my intent.
And number two, I hope you know at least the hundreds of law enforcement agencies that make up CLEAT is opposed to it. Most police officers, most police chiefs are opposed to it because they think it will endanger their life. And I will, Mr. President, yield at this time, but I plan to come back and speak as long and hard as I can against the bill and this amendment if it goes on.
Senator,
Huffines, I hope one last question. Senator Huffines, in closing, I wish you would arrange the opportunity for law enforcement, police chiefs, rank and file, men and women that put their lives on the line every day for you to hear their opinion before this bill is voted on. And I would actually work with you to get the leadership to give us a couple hours to hear from law enforcement. I hope you'll take that under advisement.